Something felt wrong the moment we stepped into those hills, like the air itself was holding its breath. I don't know if it was the silence or the way the trees seemed to lean just a little too close, but I swear, it was like the forest was waiting for us to make a mistake. It was late summer, the kind of August where the heat clings to your skin like damp cloth, and the cicadas hum so loud it feels like they're inside your skull. My name's Ethan, and I was 22, fresh out of college with no real plans except to kill time before the real world sank its teeth into me. My girlfriend, Claire, and our two friends, Matt and Jess, had the same idea. Get out of town, away from the city's concrete and noise, and spend a weekend camping in the Blackwood Hills. It was Claire's idea, actually. She'd grown up not far from there, in a small town called Harrow, and she'd always talked about the hills like they were some kind of sacred place. "It's peaceful," she'd say, her eyes lighting up. "You can hear yourself think out there." Matt, always the skeptic, had laughed it off. "Sounds like a great place to get eaten by mosquitoes," he'd said, but he was in. Jess, his girlfriend, was the wild card, quiet, artsy, always sketching in her little notebook. She didn't care where we went as long as she could draw the scenery. The Blackwood Hills weren't exactly famous, but they had a reputation. Locals called them the Bleeding Hills because of the red clay that oozed out of the ground after heavy rains, staining the streams and riverbeds like blood. Claire told us it was just a quirk of the soil, nothing spooky, but the name stuck in my head. I'd looked up the area online before we left, mostly out of curiosity, and found a few old forum posts about the hills. Hikers mentioned weird stuff. Compasses spinning wildly, strange noises at night, even a story about a guy who swore he saw a figure standing in the trees, watching him. Most of it sounded like campfire tales, the kind of thing people make up to scare each other. I didn't think much of it. I mean, every forest has its ghost stories, right? We drove up on a Friday afternoon, the four of us crammed into Matt's beat-up Jeep with our tents, sleeping bags, and enough snacks to survive a month. The road to the hills was narrow, winding through fields and past rusted-out barns that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. By the time we reached the trailhead, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky a bruised purple. The parking lot was just a gravel patch at the edge of the forest, empty except for a single pickup truck that looked like it had been abandoned years ago, its tires flat and windows caked with grime. "Charming," Matt muttered, slinging his backpack over his shoulder. Claire rolled her eyes but didn't say anything. She was already scanning the trail map, her ponytail bouncing as she pointed out the path we'd take. The plan was simple. Hike a couple of miles to a clearing she'd camped at as a kid, set up for the night, and spend the next day exploring. Nothing crazy, just a quick getaway to unplug. Jess was already sketching the twisted branches of a nearby tree, her pencil scratching softly against the paper. The trail was steeper than I'd expected, and the air grew cooler as we climbed, the humidity giving way to a crispness that made my breath fog faintly. The forest was dense, all towering pines and tangled underbrush, the kind of place where the light barely reached the ground. It was quiet, too. Quieter than I'd thought a forest should be. No birds, no squirrels, just the crunch of our boots on the dirt and the occasional snap of a twig. Claire led the way, confident, like she'd walked the path 100 times. Matt kept up a stream of jokes to fill the silence, but even he started to taper off after a while, his voice swallowed by the trees. We reached the clearing just as the last light faded. It was a wide, flat space ringed by pines, with a fire pit in the center that looked like it hadn't been used in years. The ground was soft, covered in pine needles, and there was a faint smell of damp earth and sap. We set up our tents, 2 small ones, one for me and Claire, one for Matt and Jess, and got a fire going. The flames crackled, sending sparks up into the darkening sky, and for a while things felt normal. We roasted marshmallows, passed around a cheap bottle of whiskey, and laughed about dumb stuff from college. Claire leaned against me, her head on my shoulder, and I remember thinking how perfect it all seemed. But then I noticed the silence again. The cicadas had stopped. The fire was the only sound, and even that seemed muted, like the forest was pressing in, smothering it. Jess noticed it too. She'd been sketching by the firelight, but she stopped, her pencil hovering over the page. "Does it feel quiet to anyone else?" she asked, her voice low. Ignored it. "It's a forest, Jess. It's supposed to be quiet." "No, it's not," Claire said, sitting up. "Forests are loud at night. Frogs, owls, crickets. There's always something." She frowned, looking out at the trees. "This is weird." I tried to brush it off. "Maybe we're just too loud, scared all the animals away." But I didn't believe it, not really. The air felt heavy, like it was sitting on my chest. I kept glancing at the tree line, half expecting to see something staring back. Nothing did, but the feeling wouldn't go away. We went to bed not long after. The fire burned down to embers. Claire curled up next to me in the tent, her breathing soft and steady, but I couldn't sleep. The silence was deafening now, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves outside. I told myself it was just the wind, but it didn't sound like wind. It sounded deliberate, like something was moving out there, circling the clearing. I lay there for hours, staring at the tent's ceiling, my heart thudding every time I heard that rustle again. Morning came slowly, the light filtering through the trees in weak gray streaks. I'd barely slept, and my head felt foggy like I'd been awake for days. Claire was already up, boiling water for coffee over a small camp stove. Matt and Jess were still in their tent, but I could hear them talking in low voices. The forest was still quiet, but the daylight made it feel less oppressive, like whatever had been watching us last night had retreated. "Sleep okay?" Claire asked, handing me a tin mug. Her smile was tight, like she was trying to convince herself everything was fine. "Not really," I admitted. "Kept hearing stuff." "You?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I thought it was just me." She glanced at the trees, her fingers tightening around her mug. "Probably just animals, right?" I didn't answer. I didn't want to say what I was thinking, that no animal ID ever heard moved like that, slow and careful, like it was trying not to be noticed. Matt and Jess emerged a few minutes later, both looking as rough as I felt. Jess's eyes were red like she'd been crying, and Matt kept rubbing the back of his neck, his usual smirk gone. "Something was outside our tent last night," Jess said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I heard it. Footsteps, heavy ones. They stopped right by the tent and just stayed there." Matt shook his head. "She's freaking herself out. It was probably a deer or something." "It wasn't a deer," Jess snapped, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. "Deer don't stand still for that long. They don't breathe like that." "Breathe?" I asked, my stomach twisting. She nodded, hugging her sketchbook to her chest. "It was loud, like someone was right there, just outside the tent, breathing. Slow, deep. I thought I was imagining it at first, but it went on for like 10 minutes. Claire's face paled. "I heard it too," she said quietly. "I didn't want to say anything. I thought maybe it was you guys." Matt laughed, but it sounded forced. "Okay, you're all freaking out over nothing. It's a forest. There's animals, wind, whatever. Let's just eat and go for a hike, yeah? Burn off the heebie-jeebies." I wanted to agree with him, to shake off the unease, but I couldn't. Something about Jess's words stuck with me. The breathing. I hadn't heard it, but I'd felt it. That sense of something close. Watching. Waiting. We ate a quick breakfast, packed some water and snacks, and headed out to explore. Claire led us deeper into the hills, following a trail that wound along a narrow stream. The water was clear but tinged faintly red, like someone had spilled rust into it. "It's the clay," Claire said when she saw me staring. "I told you, it's normal." But her voice was flat, like she didn't quite believe it herself. The deeper we went, the stranger the forest felt. The trees grew closer together, their branches tangling overhead until the sky was just a patchwork of gray through the leaves. The air was colder too, despite the sun being high. My skin prickled. Not from the chill, but from the feeling that we weren't alone. Every so often I'd catch a glimpse of movement in my peripheral vision. A shadow flitting between the trees, gone when I turned to look. I told myself it was nothing, just my tired brain playing tricks. But then Jess stopped dead in her tracks. "See that?" she whispered, pointing to a cluster of pines about 20 yards off the trail. "See what?" Matt asked, but his voice was tense now, his eyes following her finger. "There was someone there," she said. "A person, standing between the trees. They were watching us." I squinted into the shadows, my heart pounding. The trees were thick, their trunks dark and gnarled, but I didn't see anyone. Still, the hairs on my arms stood up. "You sure?" I asked. "I know what I saw," Jess said, her voice shaking. "They were tall, thin. They didn't move, just stood there, staring." Claire grabbed my hand, her grip tight. "Maybe it was a hiker," she said, but she didn't sound convinced. "There's other trails out here. Could have been someone passing through." "In the middle of nowhere?" Jess said, her eyes wide. "No one's out here, Claire. We're miles from the road." Matt stepped forward, squinting into the trees. "I don't see anything. Come on, let's keep moving. Standing here's just gonna make us all jumpy." We kept going, but the mood had shifted. The forest didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt alive, aware, like it was watching us just as much as we were watching it. The trail grew narrower, the stream beside it running faster, its red-tinged water churning over rocks. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves made my pulse spike. Jess kept glancing over her shoulder, her sketchbook clutched like a shield. Claire stayed close to me, her hand still in mine, but I could feel her trembling. That's when we found the clearing. It wasn't like the one we'd camped in. This one was smaller, more enclosed, the trees forming a near-perfect circle around it. In the center was a pile of stones stacked carefully into a rough pyramid about 3 feet high. It didn't look natural, like something a hiker would make for a trail marker. It looked deliberate, ritualistic. The ground around it was bare, not a single blade of grass or pine needle, just that red clay, packed hard and smooth. "What the hell is that?" Matt said, his voice low. Claire let go of my hand and stepped closer, frowning. "It's just a cairn," she said, but her voice wavered. "People make them all the time, to mark a spot or something." "That's not a cairn," Jess said, backing away. "That's something else. Look at the ground, it's too clean, like someone swept it." I didn't want to get closer, but I did, drawn by some morbid curiosity. The stones were smooth, almost polished, and they were arranged with precision, each one fitting perfectly against the next. There was something carved into the top stone, faint but unmistakable, a symbol, like a spiral with jagged lines radiating from it. It didn't look like anything I'd ever seen, but it made my stomach churn just looking at it. "We should go," I said, my voice sounding louder than I meant it to. "This doesn't feel right." Matt nodded, for once not arguing. "Yeah, let's head back." But Claire didn't move. She was staring at the stones, her face pale. "I've seen this before," she whispered. "What?" I asked, my heart sinking. "When I was a kid," she said, her eyes still fixed on the pyramid. "My dad used to bring me out here. There was a clearing like this with stones. He told me never to touch them, said they were old, older than the hill."
"Claire, come on," I said, grabbing her arm. "Let's go." She nodded, but her eyes lingered on the stones as we turned back. The trail seemed longer on the way back, the forest darker, the air thicker. I kept hearing things, soft footsteps, a faint whisper of movement behind us, but every time I turned there was nothing, just trees and shadows. Jess was practically jogging now, her breath coming in short gasps. Matt kept telling her to calm down, but his own voice was strained, his eyes darting to the sides. By the time we got back to camp, the sun was low again, the sky a deep orange. We were all on edge, jumping at every sound. Claire tried to act normal, starting the fire and pulling out food, but her hands were shaking. Jess sat on a log, sketching furiously, her pencil scratching like she was trying to exercise something. Matt paced, muttering about how we were all just tired, but I could see the fear in his eyes. That night, none of us slept. The sounds were back, louder now. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, circling the clearing. The breathing Jess had described was there too, low and rhythmic, like someone, or something, was standing just outside our tents. I held Claire close, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would burst. She was trembling, whispering over and over, "It's just the wind, it's just the wind," like she was trying to convince herself. Around 2 a.m. it stopped. The silence was worse. It felt like the forest was holding its breath again, waiting for something. Then we heard it. A low, guttural sound, like a moan, but deeper, more primal. It came from the direction of the trail where we'd found the stones. It wasn't human. It wasn't an animal either. It was something else, something that made every instinct in my body scream to run. "Ethan," Claire whispered, her voice barely audible. "What is that?" "I don't know," I said, my mouth dry. "But we need to leave. Now." We didn't wait for morning. We packed up in a frenzy, tearing down the tents and shoving everything into our bags. The fire was still smoldering, casting flickering shadows that made the trees look alive, moving. Jess was crying, clutching her sketchbook, and Matt was trying to stay calm, but his hands were shaking as he zipped up his bag. The moan came again, closer this time, and we froze. It was coming from the trail, the same direction we needed to go to get back to the car. For a moment, none of us moved, just stood there, staring into the darkness. Then Jess screamed. I turned, and there it was, a figure tall and thin standing at the edge of the clearing. It was too dark to see its face, but it was human-shaped, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, like it was studying us. It didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, its silhouette stark against the faint glow of the fire. "Run!" Matt shouted, and we did, bolting down the trail, our flashlights bouncing wildly. The figure didn't follow, or at least I didn't see it. But I could feel it, that same oppressive weight from the night before, like the forest itself was chasing us. The trail seemed to twist, the trees closing in, branches snagging at our clothes. The stream was louder now, roaring like it was alive, the red water glinting in the moonlight. We didn't stop until we reached the car, our breaths ragged, our faces slick with sweat. Matt fumbled with the keys, cursing as he unlocked the Jeep. We piled in, and he floored it, the tires spitting gravel as we tore out of the lot. I kept looking back, expecting to see that figure standing in the road, but there was nothing. Just darkness. We didn't talk the whole drive back. Claire sat next to me, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Jess was in the back, still clutching her sketchbook, her eyes wide and unblinking. Matt gripped the wheel like his life depended on it, his jaw clenched. When we got back to the city, we tried to act like it was nothing, like we'd just had a bad camping trip, but none of us could shake it. Jess stopped sketching after that weekend. She burned her sketchbook, said she didn't want to remember what she'd drawn in the hills. Matt started drinking more, his jokes replaced by a quiet anger. Claire, she changed the most. She stopped talking about the hills, stopped talking about her childhood. Sometimes I'd catch her staring out the window, her eyes distant, like she was still there, still hearing that moan. A few weeks later, I found an old article online, buried in some local history archive. It was about the Blackwood Hills from the 1800s. Settlers had disappeared there, whole families gone without a trace. The locals blamed the land, said it was cursed, that the red clay wasn't clay at all but blood, seeping up from something buried deep beneath the hills. There was a mention of strange stones, arranged in circles, marked with symbols no one could read. The article called them altars, said they were older than the settlers, older than the tribes who'd lived there before them. I didn't show the article to Claire. I didn't need to. I think she already knew. We never went back to the hills. We don't talk about that trip. Not with each other. Not with anyone. But sometimes, late at night when the world is quiet, I hear it. That low, guttural moan. Faint, but unmistakable. And I wonder if we brought something back with us. Something that's still waiting, just outside the light.